If you've got the time and stomach for it, I've got a review for you. Let's talk about In the Lost Lands.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. We are back, the Eye of the Storm podcast. So today we will be reviewing In the Lost Lands. But before we get into that, you already know what time it is. Movie recommendation time. I'd say the best recent thing which I have seen this week was Dope Thief. It was a new Apple series. It's called Dope Thief. A new Apple series which just came out. So just like these two friends pretend to be DEA agents whenever they go on drug busts just to rob the drug dealers, and then they end up robbing the wrong drug dealer, wrong person, and it just goes haywire from there. I'm on episode 2, I believe. So I don't know obviously how the story ends up progressing, but so far so good, really good. I'm actually surprised it came from Apple because it starts off good in the beginning, and I think with Apple series, which I tend not to like, it's a very slow build up, but this one I think it starts off interesting enough from the get go. So yeah, Dope Thief is definitely a new series which you guys should check out.
So the best thing I watched this week is A Dark Song, which is a 2016 occult horror movie, which is essentially about two people who embark on an occult ritual. So this woman basically lost her child and she wants to kind of get in touch with the spirit. And so she hires this occultist who basically is supposed to guide her through this ritual. And the entire movie is basically just them in an empty house in the countryside, kind of just going through the steps of this occult ritual, which takes weeks and weeks to do. And the mental strain and the psychological issues that go into that. And then over time, they kind of start, like they have to cleanse themselves and they have to study the right incantations in the right languages, and they have to create the right circumstances to break through to another, to the other side and stuff like that. There's basically two halves to it. The first one is, what if all of occult philosophy was real and all of these principles just applied? And how would somebody navigate that? A real person, how would they engage with that? How would they use that to get what they want, and what would the ramifications of that be? And then the second half of it is the psychology of this woman who has been unable to move on from the death of her son and is basically resorting to this destructive behavior to kind of, because that's the only way she can deal with it. And then that's kind of the setup, and then the story kind of progresses from there, because once you start the ritual, you can't really stop it. It's basically carried by these two performances of the woman and this occultist she's hired, and just their interactions, and as they go through all of these different steps and ordeals and trials. And it's just a good watch.
It's time for the main event. Please, can you give a little synopsis to the people?
So, In the Lost Lands is an apocalyptic Western sci-fi story that is essentially set in this post-apocalyptic world where all of civilization has been kind of reduced to this city-state that is surrounded by the Lost Lands, which is just this post-apocalyptic wasteland filled with monsters. And there's this character called Grey Alice who can make your wishes come true, but it comes at a price, usually by not quite taking the form that you would like. And so she is approached by the queen of that city-state, and she wants to become a shapeshifter. And to do that, Alice has to go into the Lost Lands to retrieve the skin of her shapeshifter, which the queen can then use to shapeshift herself. And also she is hired by the queen's bodyguard, who is hiring her to fail because he thinks the queen would be worse off if she became a shapeshifter. And the deal with Grey Alice is that she cannot turn anybody away, and so she basically has to take both of those jobs, and she has to basically fulfill them both at the same time. And so she hires this tracker who leads her to the shapeshifter who she has to kill, and they basically go on this quest into the Lost Lands to kill a shapeshifter, bring back its skin in order to fulfill this quest. So what were your thoughts and takeaways from In the Lost Lands?
Plus, I didn't think it was as bad as the critics made it seem like it was. Even like I didn't even read critics' reviews, but I was like watching different movie reviews and stuff, and people making it seem like it was just terrible. I don't think it was terrible. I think it was average, slightly above average, but it was average. I think the okay. I don't think the quest itself. it wasn't as compelling and as dangerous as the aesthetic look was given, even though I didn't really like the style. As in, when I say style, I mean in terms of like the whole monarch, the whole monarch look type of, gray, black and gray type of look. I didn't really like that. I think it was cool. It wasn't, like I said, it wasn't anything out of the ordinary. I didn't like the trailer when I first saw it, to be honest with you. It just looked like there was a lot going on. But in the movie, it starts off pretty engaging-ish. However, in terms of like the journey itself, is not as compelling as I wanted it to be. I'll be honest with you. It seems very half-hearted when it comes to certain things, especially when it comes to like the relationship dynamic, especially between the main, I forgot their names, but obviously the main actress and Bautista. I'm always gonna call her Bautista, but yeah, between him and her, it wasn't as like the stakes didn't really feel high enough. It kind of felt like they were just. It felt like it was kind of predictable in a way in terms of like the outcome of their relationship, if you want me to be honest. And I think the story in general was pretty much predictable, except for one revelation, which obviously we'll talk about later when it comes to Baptista. But overall, I think the story, it just wasn't compelling enough, but it wasn't bad. It wasn't like freaking. It wasn't Borderlands terrible. Hell no. Like I said, it wasn't good. It was just slightly above average. I was like, okay, I'm not mad at that. I wasted like that. Bought the cinema ticket. It was cool. But overall, I think the story wasn't that engaging enough, but performances were all right. It was decent. I think overall, I had a okay experience with this.
So for me, this is the kind of movie that I really have been trying to like for a long time. Like all the different pieces are things I should like, or the kind of movie I should be able, I should be up for. But they never quite get there, and the reason most of the time has to do with story, where even if there's an interesting setup or something, the story falls apart or it turns into generic action schlock, or the characters are completely uninteresting and just cardboard cutout or whatever, or there's just no story at all. That's kind of what I expected when I first saw the trailer. I said, "Oh, not again, not one of these again." And Paul W.S. Anderson, the director, has kind of made a career out of movies like this, right? And then I saw a story by George R.R. Martin. I said, okay, so if you take a story, like George Martin is known for setting up interesting character dynamics, like characters with these internal conflicts where they are kind of in conflict with themselves. And this basic setup, if you take that from an average George Martin story and then put some action schlock on top of it, the end result might actually be pretty cool. So I walked in and said, okay, let's see if you can do this. And it turns out they couldn't. The bulk of the movie is butt ugly. It's washed out. It's gray and sand and orange and dark. The actors are just whispering their lines in close up. The cinematography of it is garbage. The acting is both hammy and underwhelming. And the actual interesting story, which is the way in which those two mutually exclusive wishes can be granted. That is actually the interesting part, but it's really tacked on in the last 10 minutes. It simply does not add up to a like movie length story. It's kind of a cool idea, which as it turns out comes from the short story. And then all the other noise surrounding it was kind of stapled on top, but it does not support or it does not serve to make that idea work or more interesting or more fleshed out. This movie basically starts with post-apocalyptic Templars trying to hang a witch, and she mind controls them into letting her go. And the High Inquisitor with her aviator glasses is kind of hemming it up and kind of swearing vengeance and all of that stuff, right? Like, there's a lot of pieces in here that could be turned into a cool story, but they simply don't add up to a real movie. And so I was kind of not exactly upset and not exactly surprised, because like that is just a Paul Anderson movie. But I felt like there was the foundation here for something better that was not realized. And for that reason, I kind of walked away just a little bit disappointed.
So you've seen the short story?
So I actually went out and read it afterwards. I basically bought, like, there's this short story collection. So before George Martin wrote Game of Thrones, he wrote a whole bunch of mostly sci-fi short stories, like very few of which have really become famous or really successful. But In the Lost Lands is one of them. And it's a very short story. It's very anemic. The basic idea of it is intact, right? So one thing I actually expected was that this would just make a hatchet job of the source material, that it would take some names and maybe some imagery, and the rest would just be generic nonsense. And that's kind of surprisingly, that is kind of not what this is. What this actually is that it takes a very, very, basically a skeleton of a story, and realizes that that's not enough to hold up a movie. And so it piles other stuff on top of it, but the two don't really connect. So, for example, everything to do with the Overlord, I think he's called, like this idea that the city is run by this dying tyrant, and the queen is essentially usurping the throne by trying to get pregnant, and once she is pregnant, to continue the dynasty, she kills the Overlord and then just seizes power. And this whole idea about the patriarch, that half the power is the Overlord and then half the power is the church, and those two are kind of working together to keep the city alive, but also they're rivals. That stuff is not in the short story. In the short story, Grey Alice just goes out, is just hired by the queen and the bodyguard. She goes out into the Lost Lands, hires Boyd, and basically he leads her into a trap, but actually she set up a trap, and they fight, and she wins, and she takes his skin back to the queen, and then the bodyguard essentially realizes that both he and the queen are now cursed by having their wishes granted, which is how Grey Alice operates. And that's basically the short story. And so if you wanted to adapt this, you would have to flesh it out a lot, right? You would have to give more context. The world is basically not described. There's a few details here and there where you can kind of imagine what it looks like, but there's not a lot of detail there. You have to come up with a lot of stuff. But what this movie essentially did was to just throw in some generic sci-fi post-apocalyptic stuff and just call it a day. Like, it did not really connect those two different pieces, I think. So I actually think the conflict between the patriarch and the queen is really cool, and that could have been a movie by itself if you developed that into a story. If you had thought about, okay, what's the power basis for each of these two, and why does the Overlord dying enable the patriarch to seize power, and what does the queen think about that, and what's her counter move, and who do the people side with? Like this whole thing about once the Overlord is dead, the people just rise into rebellion. And Grey Alice says, yeah, I knew this would happen, but it's not explained why. It's not explained why they do this. It's kind of alluded to the fact that the church has made the people hate witches, and the queen is associating with witches, and therefore that can be used against the queen. But we don't see this happen. We don't see the patriarch give a big speech exposing this, for example. And so there's like all these different pieces where as I was watching it, I was kind of saying, yeah, this is not bad. I want to see how they bring this together. And then movie's over. And turns out they didn't. Like, I think if you did this properly, if you did a proper adaptation of this, you would take the basic skeleton of it, and then you would expand the lore, right? You would explore more about what Grey Alice is like, and why, and who she is, and why she can't turn anybody away, right? Like, it's almost comical, where in the final sequence, Grey Alice just says at the camera, I can't refuse anybody. She says it like 5 times in 3 minutes, but it's not explained why. Like, what? Like, why is she? Like, is she like bound by some kind of curse? Is she some kind of fairy creature that cannot, that does not have free will? Because apparently she's just a person who knows stuff, right? And that was something that could and should have been expanded on. Like, why is Grey Alice this way, and why can she not turn anybody down, and why does she know everything, and why can't she do anything? Each of which is fine. Like, that's kind of this idea, like this whole idea of you have this immense power, but you are basically cursed to destroy other people's lives by giving them what they want. And it turns out what people want is not what they need. That kind of, like, that's a very George Martin type idea. And that is kind of why I like his stories and his books, because it's full of ideas like this. But then if you are if you're adapting that, can you not build on that a little bit and kind of just fill in some blanks? You've already got a really cool story at your basis. So you don't even need to come up with the entire thing. Like, coming up with this dynamic of why giving the queen the shapeshifter fur fulfills both wishes that are seemingly mutually incompatible. That's a really cool setup, and that takes a little bit of thought to figure out why this is the case. And I think that works out, right? This whole thing about the queen basically, in order to get what she wants, she has like the reason she wants to be a shapeshifter is to be with Boyd, but in order to become a shapeshifter, Boyd has to die. And similarly, the bodyguard wants to be with the queen, but now he's with somebody who is essentially whose life has been ruined because she loves another man, and that man had to die, and she can't get him back. But she has she has a daily reminder of why he's dead, right? Because she still got the fur, and so they got what they wanted, but it's destroyed their lives. And that's really cool. That's this very Shakespearean tragedy kind of thing. 90% of the work was already done for you. Why did you not, why did you not get over the finish line? Why did you have to clutter it up with these weird details that have nothing to do with that? That's kind of the number one thought I had as I was watching this.
I kept on saying like it felt like everything was half-hearted in a way. Like it felt like it each not each scene, but a lot of the scenes did feel like it was like half finished. Because I do get like the whole mystique feel and theme of the film is kind of like revolved around that as well as like power, magic, and the consequences of magic and desire. So I understand, even though I don't think those themes were executed, but not to the degree that I would have liked it to be. That's why I don't feel like the film was as compelling enough, because like especially with the main actress, right? Like you were right. It's like why, like how did she come to be the way I thought it was gonna build up to that, but it didn't. So I was like, okay, that's one. And then with the guy and what's his name?
Boyd.
Boyd, yeah, Boyd, like with his character as well. It was like he had like a heart to heart with I keep calling it Alice from because Resident Evil, but
Well, she's Alice in this too. And by the way,
oh yeah,
that's a coincidence. She was called Grey Alice in the short story as well. So I've seen some people say, well, clearly Paul Anderson is a hack. He didn't even change the name. He's already doing these schlocky sci-fi action movies in which he casts his wife, where she always plays the same character and has for 20 years. So the whole thing is already weird. And now he's not. And now he's even given up on changing the name. But no, actually, Grey Alice has always been the character's name.
yeah.
That wasn't their idea. So yeah, so they have a heart to heart.
He kind of does say how he came to be in a way as well. He has that little speech. I get that, but it still kind of feels underdeveloped, especially like there were like especially with him and the Queen. I understand they showed snippets and that relationship showed how that came into fruition, but it didn't feel like there wasn't enough mystique, or like just like the story just felt very one surface, one level. There wasn't anything to what was being presented. Like when we spoke about Incantation, one of the things about that movie was like there was a lot of layers, to what was going on, and like yeah, there was a lot of layers to what was going on, etc. So the story felt very cohesive. Whereas this one, I was like, yeah, it's pretty much simple. It feels very simple. It feels like a longer version of the short film, and it shouldn't have felt like that. Even though I get like an adaptation is a longer version of the short film, but it just felt like they didn't really do anything with the source material that they had. Is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, it feels like everything they added did not connect to the basic idea, right? So, like for example, the whole thing about the patriarch. So first of all, they're not as generic as you might think, right? Like this uses a bunch of orthodox iconography, which I don't think I've ever seen in a movie. Like the cross with the bars in it, and the patriarch, like his outfit, his robe, that looks a lot like the real world patriarch of Orthodox Christianity. And I don't think I've seen it anywhere else before, so that's cool. That's just at least it's not space Catholics, right? Like every other like post-apocalyptic story. The movie basically did get some points from me for not making it that obvious. It could have been a whole lot more generic, and I'm kind of okay with like the post-apocalyptic stuff and the westerns and the radiation zombies and the witch and everything. Like all these different pieces don't really go together, and I think it would have been a better story if they had harmonized those ideas, like if they kind of connected in some way. But I'm okay with this whole idea of, yeah, this is a movie about a witch who hires a cowboy to go out into the post-apocalyptic wasteland to kill a werewolf. It's okay. I'm fine with that. You then just need to take those pieces and build something with it, and they kind of didn't, right? Like each of the individual pieces did not really connect to anything else. So we touched on the power struggle between the queen and the patriarch. Like that by itself should have been its own movie, and the reason why the people side with one over the other should have been like there should have been a reason, and that could have been really compelling by itself. And this whole idea of maybe Alice kind of being kind of the kingmaker, where she has no choice, where if somebody asks her for a favor, she has to fulfill it. And so if you want to get to power, you just have to figure out what to ask of Grey Alice. You can't just ask her, make me king, but you can ask her for something, and that then has a consequence, and you can, and something like that, right? Could all have been possible.
And you know what? Now that you say that, that's right. Like Alice and Baptista, they could have been like side characters to the main story, which could have been obviously the Queen and kind of like her journey and to get to where she wants to get to, which is obviously to be her main love. I think that would be really good because it felt like Alice and Baptista's, I keep calling him Baptista or whatever, Baptista's story, like it was cool, but it would have been, but like you said, it would have been way more. That storyline could have been incorporated in the Queen's storyline. Because the Queen's storyline, like firstly, you could have said how she came to be, and then you could have shown obviously like the issues, and obviously everyone's trying to reach, like obviously you got, I don't know what they were called, but they weren't were they Catholics? They're not Catholics, were they?
Well, it's more like they use like the imagery of
Yeah,
Orthodox
yeah.
Christianity.
Yeah. But like, or there's like a lot of story that could have been said with them as well. So you are right. They could have been, yeah, they could have been side characters. And Alice, I mean, Alice could have been like a side character story.
And then other pieces that don't connect to very much is why the patriarch is so fixated on Alice. Like he talks about how the witch has to die, and they've been hunting witches apparently, but that is also not all that explored. Like, why is Alice just able to operate openly? She's not hiding, right? She's just there. She's known. She's known to be a witch, or at least perceived as a witch. And somehow there's this witch hunt going on, but it's not baked into how people relate to each other. And people apparently just work in a mine all day until a witch comes, something happens nearby, and they start cheering for the witch to die, and then they go back to their mining work. It's like not a real place, right? It's not. It doesn't feel like a real play. Like in the short story, it's more of a fantasy vibe, like a post-apocalyptic fantasy vibe, where it's this medieval city with a castle, and the guards are not more described like knights, and the Lost Lands are more like something that's where all life has been drained from them. And the only thing we know about them is that they are weird creatures, like shapeshifters, like things that take other shapes, that sort of thing. That's what lives in the Lost Lands, and all we know about Alice is that she's from the Lost Lands. And we don't know if she's the only one, or if there are others like her. Like it's not made clear. And here it just turns into just like Mad Max, Fallout, just the most generic post-apocalyptic stuff. There's radioactive imagery around. So, for example, when they go into this reactor and this cooling tower where they are attacked by the radiation zombies, first of all, that's straight out of Fallout. Like, why is radiation important in this, and why are people living in like in a cooling tower, and why are we not seeing more about them? Why are they just a monster to attack? Why is it just a video game level? And then they take shelter on a big radiation sign. The circle that they stand on has this big radiation sign on it, and the camera kind of pulls out, and we see them stand on this giant rock or slab of metal or whatever it is that has this giant radioactivity sign on it. Doesn't mean anything. Are they? Is like radioactivity the source of the magic? Is it what destroyed the world? Is that what keeps them safe? What is it a symbol of exactly? Like you can just assume that like there was a nuclear war, but so what? What did actually happen in this world, and why is this imagery like this? And I'm not necessarily like, I like the short story quite a bit, and that explains nothing, right? The short story will not give you any answers. It's simply this character moment of characters wanting incompatible things. That's all it is, right? But it still makes more sense than this because the movie kind of sprinkles in these images that you know. You've got the evil Christians, you've got the train, you've got the people working in the mines, you've got the destroyed cities, you've got the radiation tower and radiation imagery, you've got Western imagery, and all of it is a little bit familiar, but none of it really means anything. Like you are like the idea of a symbol is that it carries meaning and that explains things and gives context to something without having to explain it. But here it just creates more questions because it's seemingly just piled on top of each other randomly. And that is just one thing that I absolutely hate in stories. Like, make it mean something, anything. Pick something, and then give us some symbols and iconography and imagery that supports that idea. And I'm there, and it doesn't have to be the most creative thing ever. But if you're just giving me like a 2 hour cliche parade, and none of the pieces connect, and nothing in the end means all that much, I'm not impressed. And that's basically and that's pretty typical for Paul Anderson movies, but this took the cake because they just went to 11 with it.
It feels like, because obviously with the director's style, it's very action heavy. So it feels like that was his, like, that's where his concentration lied, rather than the story itself. Because yeah, I did, like I said before, I did like see, even though I haven't read the short story, it's pretty simple to understand what the film is about. In terms of, like, like I said, rising to power, desire, and the consequences of magic. So I think when it comes to tech boxes, yeah, you can tick those boxes. However, it seems like that he wasn't not he wasn't interested. He just kind of like put more of the look came at the expense of the story, because like you said, there were things which were added. Even though, like I said, even though I think the story was average, it was slightly above average. Not good, but slightly above average, because like I mentioned, I think when it comes to tick boxes in terms of like what the story is about, it's it's cohesive in a sense, in terms of like things, like the storyline is pretty simple, it makes sense. However, there are certain fillers, like you mentioned, the whole radiation. What was the purpose of that being there?
Yeah,
So I personally
it's not so much that the parts don't make sense. It's that they don't connect, and they don't add up to something. Like, I didn't understand why, like, what the role of radiation in this was, and I honestly, like, it's I think it's a waste of time to try to figure it out, because I think Paul Anderson very clearly is style over substance, right? He just is interested in making us look cool at the expense of it making sense or saying anything or being interesting. Except this didn't look cool. Like, there were a few set pieces in this where I said, yeah, okay, this is kind of neat. So the big fight where Gray Alice turns into a bird to fight Boyd's, that's straight from the story. So they didn't even come up with that. There was the scene where the train gets lured into a chasm and it kills all of them. And as an image, that at least looked neat, even though it didn't make any kind of sense. Like, it was literally like Gray Alice stood on the tracks, the train went after her, she ran down the tracks, and then took shelter under the tracks, and the train just ran down a cliff, and everybody died. And it's like, why did they do this? Why did they not brake? Why did they not get off the train and chase her? Right? But then there's other ones too, where there's like the school bus that's kind of turned into a cable car to cross a chasm, and Gray Alice and Boyce have made it across the chasm, and the Inquisitors are after them, and they have a sniper rifle. Boyce gets shot once, and the next shot will be lethal, and so Alice basically hypnotizes them through the scope of the sniper rifle to make it seem like they have disappeared, and so they can't take the next shot. That was kind of okay. It's not all garbage, right? Or like this, when the patriarch gives his big speech and kind of rallies the crowd, and it's this giant cross behind him that's made out of like industrial junk. It's not all completely ugly, but like overall the art direction of this was just so ugly. Like, everything is blurry and it's all close-ups, and like oftentimes it's entirely CGI, where even the characters aren't real, especially when you see them from far away. It's all kind of dusty and orange and yellow. It's quite amazing.
Like inspiration. Like,
Well, I thought it was Rebel Moon because Rebel Moon has a similar
yeah,
kind of early 2000s video game cutscene aesthetic to it, and it's also incredibly ugly. Like I did not enjoy looking at the scenery in Rebel Moon, and it wasn't just about the haircuts of the character of the bad guys of the Mother World. It was everything was just ugly, and much like with this movie, there was like the occasional thing that looked kind of neat, but it never meant anything. So, for example, in Rebel Moon, you've got this robot, right, who used to be like this elite soldier who has now been programmed into servitude, and he's voiced by Anthony Hopkins, and he's kind of a pacifist, and he has these big voiceovers a couple of times throughout the movie, so you think he's important. And then he's got deer antlers, and you keep thinking, okay, like, is this like, will this pay off in some way? Will we get something interesting out of this character, and will the pieces come together to shape something interesting? And the answer is no. Like, nothing ever happens. He fights some dudes later on in the movie, and he's badass, and that's kind of it. And that's kind of, I've even forgotten the name of that robot, but like that was like one of the examples in which Rebel Moon was terrible because it was almost interesting in some of its designs, but then those never came together, and most of the designs weren't even good. And this is kind of the same, where I say, okay, so it's kind of interesting that you're using Orthodox imagery instead of Catholic imagery, and some of the like, smaller details of the city are kind of okay. And when Alice breaks out the twin sickles and does some badass kung fu, to fight some goons, like little details of this are not are pretty okay. And then you wait for it to come together, and you wait for it to go somewhere interesting, and it doesn't. And also, you don't even get eye candy. Like this is the big thing where people, like, when people defend these kinds of movies, they will often say, "Oh yeah, it's just good fun. Like, it doesn't all have to be high art. It doesn't all have to be like this incredible character, like deep character study. Sometimes you can just have some fun with some mindless action." But then I ask, okay, what's the fun in this? Like, a lot of it is very dreary, very bleak, very muddled, very messy, and it just looks terrible. It looks like a 20-year-old video game cutscene in many places. And I'm asking, okay, let's say you don't care about story, you don't care about character. You kind of took some neat ideas from this short story with a big name that will get people's attention. I was one of the suckers whose attention they got because it said George R.R. Martin on it. But then all you basically want to do is have fun with CGI fights for Tars. That's fine, but then at least impress me with that. If you give me what's the budget of this? Okay, 55 million is the budget for this. That's not a lot, right? But yeah, give me some stunt people, give me some CGI artists, and I can come up with something crazy at least 2 or 3 times in the movie, and the rest might at least be competent. But just in terms of coming up with ideas, it can't be that hard. And then people like this come along and get to make movies like this one after the other, right? And I think they make just enough money so that he can make the next one. And I think Resident Evil specifically has made stupid amount of money. But yeah, like the early ones were kind of fun, and then they got increasingly convoluted and out there. But like I tried to watch Monster Hunter, which was I think the last one by that director, and just a miserable slog. And and then this one, like, I can't even just have fun with this because like the number of things where I thought that was kind of cool it's a pretty short list, and it's not nearly long enough for a 2-hour movie. And like, if you watch like 2 clips on YouTube, you've seen the movie, you've seen the good parts of the movie, and the rest either is ugly and nonsensical, or it's kind of just a piece, like it does not really hang together, and so the whole thing is not a whole story. So that's kind of my bottom line with this movie, which and there's I'm not even. You can nitpick the story and like this scene is bad or that character design or that action framing or whatever. I think from just a filmmaking standpoint, it's the laziest in a while because it's all clearly filmed. Like almost all of it is close-ups in front of green screens. Like there's very little else going on. But just from a standpoint of let's have some fun with some action scenes, like I can watch some clips from like Resident Evil movies that are at least out there, right? That at least, okay, so this is like somebody had some fun coming up with this. And here, I did not think that anybody was having fun. I did not think that anybody sat down and said, okay, what can we do with these characters in this world, and what crazy thing? Like there's the occasional one, right? Like when Alice breaks out the sickles and fights some acolytes. I was there, right? But it's like a handful of scenes within those 2 hours, and it's just not enough. And I keep wondering why, if somebody has a track record for this sort of thing, why can they keep making movies like this? Because it's not like this is a surprise to anybody, right? In the same way that Rebel Moon wasn't really a surprise to anybody, right? It's kind of the same thing over and over again, and it must make enough money on streaming or whatever to kind of justify its existence. And I kind of want to take people to the side and say, hey, can you watch some Pacific Rim or Kingsman or John Wick, or like there's a whole bunch of movies that are simple, uncomplicated, straightforward action. Like even watch an average like Hong Kong like Jackie Chan movie, and like watch like Police Story. Like the story is complete garbage, but you can kind of be on your phone while you watch it, and then 5 or 6 times during the movie you get some really cool action sequences where that's clearly the reason why you show up. Like I watched a Police Story a while ago. It's like it's classic Jackie Chan movie about this cop who kind of goes rogue to go after corrupt people, whatever. Like the plot is not very much, but there are these incredible action sequences that you can just watch over and over, and that is clearly where the skill and the energy and the creativity went into. And then there's also a story, because we have to, like, it's a movie, so it has to have a story, and that's kind of the yardstick with which I measure movies like this, because clearly we're here to have fun with the action sequences and the CGI and the creature designs and the weapons. But can you not just staple like a functional story at its core and then use that to prop up your action sequences and have fun with that? And then the story is just there enough to kind of get you from one scene to the next, but it doesn't actually get in the way, and it doesn't actually drag down the movie. But instead we get stuff like this, and I just don't really get it. I don't understand why there isn't anybody who can do better, apparently, because it should be that hard to at least have like a functioning, straightforward story, and then do some crazy set pieces a few times, and that's your movie. Like if that was the benchmark for like a schlocky action movie, I would have a much better time with this.
I think that's something which, by the way, Hunter was not great whatsoever. But I think that's something kind of like you're gonna have to. Yeah, you can blame the director, but also you have to blame the people. And you're right, you kind of hit in terms of what you're saying. Like sometimes I wish I could just put them to the side and say, "Have you seen Pacific Rim? Have you seen John Wick?" Because yeah, you are right. Like, I think
There's plenty of good action movies that are not that like. I'm not saying John Wick has a bad story or anything, but the attraction is the gunfights, right? Or Kingsman, the attraction is the cool set pieces, like the pub fight or the church fight. There's like a scene in Kingsman where, as a training exercise, they flood the kind of the barracks of the trainees, and they have to find a way to get out. Like it's basically, yeah, you're woken up and you have 3 minutes to find a way to survive, the kind of thing. And it's a really cool, inventive action scene, right? There are plenty of movies out there that can do this and have done this. Even watching just Aliens, right? Like the plot is not that demanding if you just want to see Space Marines kill some aliens. Like Aliens gives you a bunch of that, right? Like the plot doesn't have to be stupid. Like there's no reason for why you have to sacrifice plot for dumb fun action. It just seems so obvious to me. I feel like I'm taking crazy pills when I see movie after movie like this come out that basically goes, yeah, but like who cares? Like we're gonna give you some mediocre action and maybe 2 cool shots, and that's it. Thanks for buying a ticket. See you next time. I feel taken for a ride by a movie like this, right? Because surely the people involved could have done better. Like in terms of just coming up with something more fun.
I don't really think there's much to add to this. It's an ongoing issue. I think it's just how much effort that they want to put in, because either they're just not that good enough, or that is like how much effort do they want to put in, because they already know that this is gonna make money. So Well, actually, no, I can't really say that, because I don't even know how this movie's doing. However,
So far, it hasn't. So far, on a $55 million budget, it's made $3 million.
oh,
And I had to go quite far. Like, wait, we live in London, right? Like, we're not living in the middle of nowhere. I had to travel quite far to get to a cinema that showed this. And there were like four people in the showing, and none of them had a good time. Like, everybody kind of just, when the movie was over, they kind of just got up and left. Right? There was no sense of having fun with this. It's like I would never have seen this if it hadn't been for this. So I understand that everybody likes a paycheck, right? Like the fact that, Dave Bautista got paid, Milla Jovovich got paid, all these other actors. I think those are pretty much the only two that I think Ali Jova is fairly well known as well, and everybody else is kind of looks like Polish actors who were not expensive, right? So I understand that everybody likes a paycheck, everybody likes to work, everybody's looking for like the next gig, and they're not gonna turn it down just because the script is terrible. But while you were at it, could you not have done something more interesting?
yeah.
Like how hard would it have been?
I was like, and he's given the source material as well. It's not like he started from scratch.
Yeah.
So that's what even makes it kind of like worse in a way. Because like, if this was an original story, cool, we can kind of give you like the benefit, not even the benefit of that, but we can give you more of a benefit of a doubt in comparison to you being given source material already. So it's like, yeah, I feel you could tell his main focus was just on like just his visual, like just the visuals and the action rather than the story itself. Because like I did say, even though I did say it's cool, it's average, I did say it wasn't compelling enough. So yeah, and it showed.
Yeah.
All right, well, last thoughts. Um, I still, stand by what I said. I still think it wasn't terrible, but it was slightly above average in comparison to the films I have seen. But, it wasn't good. It wasn't good, but it was, like I said, it was slightly above average. Just think more work could have definitely done on the story and in terms of like, character relationships and the way that kind of like came into fruition and the way that kind of ended. It felt like it felt like they were second, like just the story itself felt like it was second to what we were seeing. So the action and the visuals, I think that's where the main focus was put on, and you can tell. Um, Even though I am a big fan of the Resident Evil franchise, and like so clearly, I'm a big fan of some of his work. Movies like Monster Hunter and this kind of do show that it doesn't make me feel guilty of being big fans of Resident Evil because but at the same time you can it doesn't make me proud if I can say that when he's releasing stuff like this. I feel like you need to there's nothing like you said, there's nothing wrong with just investing a bit more, thought into the story itself. That's where it lacked. And a better story could have been done with, like Daniel said before, the queen and the internal issues that she's having within her little kingdom or whatever. But I still believe it's slightly above average. It's cool. I'm gonna give it a 6 out of 10.
So for me, I don't think movies like this have to be this bad. All you have to do is just do a little bit better on story and put a little bit more thought into the different pieces and what cool things you can do with them. The lack of creativity and imagination and fun is really the number one thing I've got a problem with this. I was not expecting much, and they definitely had to expand on the source material. They could not. This is not one of those cases where they simply should have just done what was on the page and they would have been better. Like this had to be expanded on, and they just did it in all the wrong ways. It's a waste opportunity. I don't see why this has to be like this. I don't see why you can't try just a little bit harder to make it fun and to make it interesting. And I don't see who wins in this, right? Like people get paid, and that's kind of all this is. And if you're looking for just dumb fun, there's much better stuff to watch that is smarter in terms of its silliness and that has more fun with what it's doing. And this has no fun, this has no creativity. This has some pieces that could have been something, but potential is cheap, and what matters is what you do with your premise and with your potential. And this does very little with it. The ending is very much stapled on, and that's the interesting part. And it does like we keep saying how like the different pieces don't connect, and that includes the The ending not really connecting all that much to what else is going on in the movie. And it once again, the movie tries to kind of convince you that something more profound is going on. Like this whole final sequence is shot in a way to make you think that this is deep, and it's not. It's just very much phoned in and very much just a paycheck, and it didn't have to be this way. So for that reason, it gets a shrug out of 5 for me.
All right, guys, thank you very much for tuning into today's episode. If you agreed with what we said, please like, share, and subscribe. And also let us know your thoughts, what you thought about Into the Lands.
If you like this video, tell a friend. If you hated this, tell an enemy.
Thank you very much for tuning in, and we'll catch you next week. Bye bye.
Bye bye.